So the question is about what's the foundation of reconciliation. The Rwandan experience was to look at drawing in religious communities and having principles based on recognizing the fundamental human dignity of every person be the foundation for which you bring about a reconciliation process and some kind of end of conflict. Is that fair? And so the second part is should secular nations step away from that and allow those forces to bring about what needs to happen? So I would say that I totally agree with the example that you gave about Rwanda and what's key, what's central there. Our work at Telos is based on begins with the notion that we have to begin by recognizing the inherent human dignity of every person who lives in the modern Holy Land, so that all Israelis and all Palestinians, no matter if they're Jewish, Christian, or Muslim, or none, all of those are image bearers of God. They're created in the image of God, and so they have dignity, and that has to be honored and respected. All right? And secondly, they're all sons of Adam and daughters of Eve in the sense that they can all do bad things, and that has to be understood too. And so both a proper understanding of human nature involves all of that. All right? But to get out of this problem that they're in terms of the conflict, it goes back to the question earlier about legitimacy, is you have to recognize that there's universal human dignity, that every human life is valuable and every person has inherent dignity, right? And religious communities have an ability to speak into that, a very powerful ability to speak in that from their own traditions, and they also have an ability to impede that too. And so you see examples of both in the modern Holy Land. In the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you will see that some of the most oppositional forces to trying to bring about this kind of understanding are actually sometimes religious voices. All right, but it need not be the case. What I have always kind of tried to argue for is that policymakers have a role to play. That religious communities on the ground don't have the authority to negotiate some kind of agreement that ends the conflict. That's actually the work of governments and policymakers. But if governments and policymakers don't draw in and the religious communities in their discussions, they're really setting themselves up for failure. One of the critiques of the failure of the Israeli-Palestinian peace talks at Camp David 2000 was that you basically had yuppies from Georgetown negotiating with yuppies from Tel Aviv, negotiating with yuppies from Ramallah. You didn't have religious actors that were in any way informing any of this, brought into this, and that ultimately was one of the reasons that what they were trying to envision was not sustainable or wouldn't be supported on the ground. And having worked both on Capitol Hill and in the State Department and now in the nonprofit sector, I've always argued for bringing religious voices to the table and working with the best of faith and sometimes defeat the worst of religion, because it's often religious voices that are very much impeding these kinds of attitudes. But it need not be the case. And there are many within each of the faith traditions who bring a different kind of message, and their voices need to be heard and amplified, and they need to be a part of the process. And I think, again, to create a sustainable peace, one that gets you beyond just some kind of signed paperwork and some kind of political arrangement, you have to bring those people into the conversation and help them build out what needs to be done.